Do vaccine passports pose a threat to our civil liberties? Let's find out. Hello everyone, welcome to The Attic. My name's Mark Jago. I'm a philosophy professor in the UK. This week the UK government has announced it plans to introduce vaccine passports from the end of September for nightclubs and other crowded venues. Essentially, these would mean that to gain entry, you would have to show that you've been double vaccinated, with exemptions for people who, for medical reasons, can't have a vaccine. This is seen by its proponents as a kind of compromise measure which allows these venues to be open, and that is super important for music industry, entertainment industry, which has been hit really hard by lockdowns, but also allowing them to be open in a safe way. It's not just a free-for-all, potentially super spreader event. But some groups have argued that introducing vaccine passports would be discriminatory or it would impinge on our civil liberties. So let's go through those arguments, be clear on what we mean by our civil liberties, and try and find out whether those arguments are good or not. Before we get going, do me a favour guys, hit that thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon to get notifications. So there's, broadly speaking, three kinds of objection against introducing measures like vaccine passports. Firstly, that they discriminate against certain sections of society. Second, that there would be other measures which would be better, like testing. And thirdly, that vaccine passports impact on our civil liberties. So I want to focus this discussion in on civil liberties, so I'm just going to very quickly go through those first two potential objections. Firstly, that vaccine passports would discriminate against certain sections of society. Okay, so who might they discriminate against? Four potential groups, I guess. Firstly, the young. Okay, so I don't think this is so much of an issue now because vaccines for a couple of weeks have been open to all age groups 18 years up in the UK, and the plan to roll in vaccine passports wouldn't kick in until the end of September. So that leaves enough time. If you go out and book a vaccine appointment for your first jab today, you'll be comfortably double vaxxed by the time the vaccine passports kick in. Second group that might be affected, people with medical issues preventing them from having the vaccine. Obviously, in these cases, you provide exemptions so that anyone who, for medical reasons, can't have a vaccine doesn't have to do anything extra to go to these venues. They can still go to these venues without having a vaccine. Third potential group, pregnant people. Okay, now this one is a bit more of a grey area. Currently, the medical advice is that vaccines are perfectly safe for pregnant women, but that hasn't always been the case. The advice has kind of flip-flopped here, and so understandably, if you're pregnant, you might be a bit more reluctant about having the vaccine. Maybe you also provide exemptions there. Fourth group who would potentially be discriminated against, people who have an ideological objection to vaccines. Anti-vaxxers. So the situation seems kind of like this. In order to drive, I have to wear my glasses. Okay, my vision isn't good enough to drive safely without them. I might be a committed anti-glasses person. Okay, that's fine. It's just that I then wouldn't be allowed to drive. There we're trying to balance people's own private opinions with the safety of them and of everybody else. And basically having me drive around without glasses on just totally wouldn't be safe, not for me, not for everybody else on the road. So we say, okay, your particular opinions on this, Mark, are outweighed by the demands of public safety. And I think that's what would be going on in the case of anti-vaxxers. Okay, let's move on to the second kind of objection. Let's not do vaccine passports, let's do testing instead. So Labour have said, for instance, that double vaccination doesn't make you 100% immune to COVID, so it's not a foolproof method. Yeah, that's true. The vaccines, the Pfizer vaccine, it's about 95% effective, but the kind of tests that we use in the UK are far less effective. So for symptomatic people, they're only 72% effective, and for asymptomatic people, that is for people who have got COVID but haven't got any symptoms, they're only 58% effective. So if we based entry to, say, nightclubs only on the results of rapid flow tests, potentially an awful lot of people going in there might have asymptomatic COVID. So I want to get onto the topic of civil liberties, okay? Various groups here in the UK, including Liberty, who I take very seriously have argued that imposing vaccine passports would be an affront to our civil liberties. So let's start off with, what are civil liberties and what kinds of things do they protect? So, civil liberties are rights and freedoms that we have as part of law, which a government shouldn't impinge on without due process. So typically these can include things like the freedom of conscience, freedom of the press, freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, the right to security and liberty, freedom of speech, the right to privacy, the right to equal treatment under the law, the right to a fair trial, and the right to life. Many of these freedoms are encoded in the European Convention on Human Rights, and here for us in the UK, that was encoded in UK law in the Human Rights Act 1998. So let's just have a little look at what the European Convention on Human Rights says that might be relevant to the question of vaccine passports. There's Article 5 on our liberty and security. There's Article 8, our right to respect for private and family life. And there's Article 11, covering our rights to association. So let's quickly go through each of those and see what they involve. Article 5 on liberty. This is liberty in the sense of not being detained. So basically that's covering your right not to be arrested and detained by the government without due process. It doesn't give you any right to the liberty to go to a nightclub without various tests going on. Article 11, the right to association, well, really that's talking about a political association, political membership. It explicitly covers your right to join a trades union, for instance. It doesn't really say anything about your right to meet up with your friends at a nightclub without a vaccine passport. Article 8, your right to private and family life. Here we're talking about basically the government should butt out of your private personal life. And you might think, yeah, it's my private life, what I want to do in my free time. I want to go to a club. The government should butt out of that. But again, that's not really the kind of provision that you've got in the article. So one example of what it does cover. So back in 1981, there was a case of prisons censoring prisoners' letters, and that was found to be contrary to Article 8. Different kind of case in 2010, it was found that various stop and search measures that the police were given by the government at the time, by the Labour government at the time, were found to be in convention of Article 8. Again, it's kind of like the case of me having to wear glasses to drive. Like, it's no good me saying, oh, it's my private life what I do in my car, whether I wear glasses or whatever, because when I'm out there in my car, I'm out there in public, I'm potentially causing a risk to other people, I've got to wear them to drive, that's for my own safety, everybody else's safety. Part of the government's job is to keep everyone safe, and one of the ways it can do that is by saying, Mark, you've got to wear your glasses if you're going to go driving. So I've kind of said that none of them really relate to your freedom to go out to a club or whatever without a vaccine passport. But even if they did, all of these rights are qualified rights. That means they all say something like, you have the right to do such and such and such, with certain exceptions. And all of these exceptions relate to the ways in which the government can override them because of other duties the government has, for instance, to keep people safe. So, for instance, Article 8 might be restricted in the interests of national security or public safety, for the prevention of disorder or crime, for the protection of health or morals, or for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. Okay, so those kind of exemptions pretty obviously cover public health crises like COVID. So I've been focusing on particular freedoms, liberties enshrined in European Convention of Human Rights. There is a general notion of civil liberty which goes beyond those particular freedoms. And this is the idea that basically the government should just butt out of citizens' lives, except for where it has to, okay, for the protection of public health, etc., etc., etc. And there are genuine questions about how far the government should intrude into individuals' lives by imposing various rules and regulations on us. Cases where this has come up in the past, going from recommending to requiring that seatbelts be worn in a car, the smoking ban, so banning smoking in inside public places. These are all cases in which the government tells individuals what they can and can't do, and which various groups have objected to on the basis of civil liberties. But here's the thing, right? Pretty much any law that's going to affect individual citizens is going to be some kind of restriction on your freedoms, right? Telling you that you can't do certain things. So, for instance, I can't drive without my glasses. I can't drive on the right-hand side of the road. I can't drive at 100 miles an hour. These are all restrictions on things that otherwise I may or may not want to do, but they're all very well motivated by the goal of public safety, which is something that the government is required to go after, okay? The government is required to keep people safe. Defending civil liberties is hugely important, particularly when they're under attack from state surveillance or from the government repressing our right to protest, the freedom of the press, the freedom of journalists to criticize the government, the freedom of academics to pursue their own line of research. These things are all really, really important in a free liberal society. But we shouldn't conflate that with our freedom to live life exactly as we are at the moment, because stuff changes. Pandemics are going to change the way we live our life. Climate change is going to change the way that we can go about our lives. And sometimes the government is going to have to say, you know what, guys, in order to keep us all safe, or in order to have a sustainable future for us as a country, for the human race, we're going to have to make some changes. And that might involve requiring us to do things differently. And look, I'm not saying vaccine passports are a perfect solution. Given where we are now and given all the mistakes that the government has made running up to this point, I don't think there are any perfect solutions. But for my money, vaccine passports are a pretty good option. And in particular, I don't think that the philosophical argument that vaccine passports would impinge on our civil liberties are overriding. Okay, guys, thank you for listening this far. I really appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this content, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit that subscribe button. And if you've got any questions or comments, leave me a note down below. Thanks again, and I will see you back here soon.